And this is now our Manage Self, Lead Others podcast. And my name is Nina Sunday. And in this episode, we're joined by our Melbourne-based facilitator and leadership expert, Kirk Fisher. Welcome, Kirk.
Thank you, Nina. Thank you, everybody, for coming what's here in Melbourne is a very cold afternoon. This is a topic that I'm really interested in. I've been involved with moving things online for the last 7 years, and it's been a very interesting process all along, but particularly now. When online learning, I do a lot of work with facilitation and working with leadership around Australia and further. And as we first started to move online, for very practical reasons, there was a lot of pushback. It can't be done well. It's going to make people into sort of like little square boxes and so forth. And over this time, I've just been amazed to see how well online learning can work, what potential it has. And particularly right now, if we are managers or leaders, we have tended to have this sense of set and forget about how, before the coronavirus hit, there may have been a sense of set and forget about how management was supposed to work. We had best practices. We had certain, ways that we've been doing things. Right now, though, that's all out the window. There's no way that we can continue to do things as we've always done them before. And more than just translating what we've done face-to-face and in an office, this is a chance to do something really brilliant and to see that there's a lot of potential to surpass even, I would say, a lot of the things that we could do face-to-face now that we're doing things remotely and stirring the pot as we're of more possibilities.
And what's happening, Kirk, is there is the research starting to come through now that's indicating exactly what differences people want to see of a permanent nature. And
Yes.
it really is up to employers to listen to that, because it's not about employers saying, well, we're just going to go back the way it used to be.
That's right.
And so, of course, one of the recent studies is this Gallup study that talked about what people want managers to do and also the mistakes people are making. So our topic is, what mistakes are managers making? So where do you want to start, Kirk?
Well, could I just highlight something you just said there, Nina, just how important management is. Management and leadership in that study that you mentioned, the Gallup workplace study, management and leadership accounts for about 70% of the variability that in terms of people's engagement. A lot of this, what the manager and leader is doing, is helping to affect the people's sense of purpose, people's sense of steadiness, that things are going to be okay. But there are particularly 5 things that were mentioned in that poll that basically boil down to can I do this and will I do this? But taking it a little bit more, yeah, you're holding it up there, great. Yeah. Taking it down into a little bit more detail, there's 5 traits or 5 factors that if managers are addressing these, it dramatically impacts on how well people are engaged. And these are also important if we're talking about leadership development courses and so forth. A lot of leadership courses don't address these and have a very small impact on teams. So this is not only important for managers and leaders to do, but also if we're looking at how we're going to develop our team in general, we need to be looking at those 5 factors. Should I just mention, go through them, or?
Yes. Yeah. Well, the first one is clear expectations.
Yes. People know what's expected of them. And there's not just being told, they're not just receiving an email about it, but they have it modeled for them. They can see it in their mind's eye. It's embodied by those around them, and it's constantly clarified by feedback and brought up in meetings and so forth. That's a really key thing for people to have.
And wouldn't it be more than just telling them what you want them to do, giving them a little bit of mentoring guidance in how they might achieve it? Now, of course, that's without being too prescriptive and saying you have to do it my way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But for example, I do remember there was a sales team where the sales manager said, "Hey guys, you just got to sell more." It's like, hang on, why don't you have a meeting about what their issues are and maybe help them problem solve? Because obviously, if they're not selling more, then maybe there are some obstacles or constraints that they're not dealing with. And you need to actually brainstorm and come up with some fresh suggestions. That's
Yes.
collaboration.
Yeah. And if, particularly, Nina, if you're talking about moving from a compliance mentality where people just do what they're told versus a results-oriented mentality, or a place where people are actually engaged, that's not a skill that people automatically have. And it's not a skill that a lot of organizations automatically have. So if we're always talking about results and engaging people in more of a growth mindset around what are some other ways we can achieve these results? What are some experiments, safe to fail experiments we can be doing around the edges, but always keeping the outcomes in mind and the results we're trying to achieve in mind? That can be a really important part of management. But we're actually talking more about leadership at that point. But yes, same idea. Yeah.
One of the suggestions that was in one of our earlier episodes was that if you are an authoritarian manager and treat your children, treat your team like they are children,
It's a
they will
good
be
mistake.
like children. They won't think for themselves. If you want people to problem solve, you have to treat them like adults and give them the perception of choice. And you're there to guide them, not to issue orders.
That's
So
right.
is that one of the mistakes that some managers have? They just issue orders and they're not actually accepting or even inviting feedback.
Yes. Well, one of the big things that came out was also a sense of purpose, that we're doing something important. My job is important. From the Blues Brothers, we're on a mission from God, kind of thing. That fervor is a really important part of the motivation for a person to take on responsibility in an engagement level, to do the right thing when no one's looking, to daydream about their job, to look for small ways to improve it, and so forth. If you feel that purpose, that's going to be one of the key motivations. But the other part of it too is that they can see that they have the skills or strengths to do their job. And this can be not only looked at in terms of what kinds of training do they need, what kind of mentoring or coaching do they need, but also has the manager sat down and listened to them, gotten to know them, and get a sense of where their strengths are, and wherever possible, guided their portfolio or guided their job in line with those strengths. That's another one of those, those two things, purpose and having the skills or strengths to do their job, are two of the other things that are mentioned as key elements of managing and engaging.
That's almost a really easy conversation to have, because I remember when I had some staff members, just as a collaborative exercise, we actually mapped out every single task that was part of her job description and then just put a rating against it. Which do you prefer? Which would you rather hand off? With no promise that we could. And it was a very simple, easy thing to actually take the things that she disliked the most doing and to actually hand that off or restructure the task to someone else who actually said, "Oh, I'd love to do that."
Yes.
So you actually restructure the role to their preferences where possible. It doesn't, just because you ask the question doesn't mean that you have to comply with everything, but maybe there's one thing that is irking them that could easily be handed off to someone else.
Yes, yes. And when a person feels that level of choice and that level of being listened to, that's one of the just intrinsic motivators that people have in their workplaces. I remember early on in my career, I love writing and developing things. And so my manager, I had 10 things I had to do for my job, but he added a little bit time so that I could create and edit the newsletter for the company. That was something that I really loved to do. That became part of my portfolio. And that, I remember, had a great sense of motivation for me and made me feel like I was co-owner of the company, as we would like people to have a lot.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing, that people can actually say they were interested in continuous improvement. If they're the sort of person that is an ideas person and they want to make those suggestions, to actually create the opportunity for them to actually work on it. Maybe setting up a Kaizen board
Yes.
You can see those on the net, where people make suggestions, and then someone who's keen to follow that up will actually drive that through the organization, work out
Yes.
the most actionable items.
Hmm.
um,
There's
with
a
yeah
There was a final one. I just where we started off talking about those five things. We've
yeah
mentioned four of them. They know what's expected. They have the skills or strengths to do their job. There's a sense of purpose. Another one is, and often I hadn't thought of this before I saw this study. They have the resources they need. And this is particularly even more important right now when we're talking about online learning. People having to set up a home office all of a sudden. Do they have the internet, microphones, cameras? Those are the kinds of things. It's almost a little bit of a hygiene factor right there, that we need that in place. But it is a really big detraction. People are always, having to struggle with their equipment, and sometimes that's another big thing we can be offering people right now.
You mentioned that sometimes managers spend their when they're managing people working remotely, that all of their communication is to the group. How important is it that managers should actually set up times for one-on-one conversations with their direct reports?
Oh, ever more important. um, uh, right now, when with people working from home, a lot of the day-to-day communication we used to have when we were in an office is gone, and that can have a lot of effects, and including a sense of worry, and perhaps people not really being sure, that they know what's going on. So, if you used to have feedback sessions or communication sessions once a month, you should be doing it once a week. If you've been checking with people once a week, you might consider every other day. But this is even more important right now, and even more important both because it's a crisis, but also because people are working remotely, that you increase the level of communication. And as we made it to end up talking a bit more about feedback, we increase the level of feedback, and particular type of feedback, strengths-based feedback, in terms of helping people to have a sense of alleviating worry, giving them feedback about their role, but also allowing them to be giving feedback. And we can expand on that if you'd like, as we go
Well,
into
there's
that.
a few issues there. One of the things that is coming out is that people are actually working longer hours working from home.
Yes, yes.
It could be that they're overcompensating in order to not come across as slacking off, not
Yeah.
working. They're actually, answering emails way into the evening just because they came in, or just not taking a lunch break, when really we're more productive if we do take frequent short breaks. In fact, the recent research is that you should take 3 minutes. You should move around the office for 3 minutes every 30 minutes at least. And if you're just sitting still at your desk, you're actually being counterproductive. So any thoughts on how to avoid burnout, and are managers actually unwittingly giving the impression that, people should be having their lunch at their desk, or they have to have total focus and can't have a short break?
Well, there's a number of things in that, and one of them is the need to have a daily schedule. And so one of the things that I think managers and people who are allies to each other in the workplace can help with is setting up a sense of reasonableness, and the division. I'm wearing a blazer right now. I'm going to work right now. That sense of like, now this time here is this. I tell the people in my family, I'm in my caravan now where I'm working right now, and and people know not to disturb me because Dad's at work right
Yeah,
now. And so
yeah.
having that distinguishment, and at 5 o'clock I leave and I go into the house, and it's a very different story. Having those sort of structures can be really helpful. I wanted to add to that, though, that beyond the manager, one of the fifth of the factors that we were talking about is that sense of relationship. Is that I have people alongside of me that know me, that I know them. They're co-committed with me to a common goal, and co-committed with me to a sense of excellence and outstanding work. And my status in the team. We are biological creatures, and having a sense of status and belonging to a tribe is a very, very inbuilt factor in who we are and how we feel about our work. So that when that is there, along with those other four factors I mentioned earlier, people will be about 3 times more, triple the level of engagement and sense of this is good work and I can do it, according to that Gallup poll that we were mentioning before. So this is a really key thing for us to be including in this as well. How do we feel a sense of tribal community about what we do?
I do know with some organizations that I've worked with, managers see having one-on-ones with their staff as part of their job, not an interruption to their real work, which is operational efficiency. Do you think to be an high EQ manager these days, you have to embrace the fact that the people skills and spending time with the people, so they, especially at this time of worry, so they feel calm and relaxed and happy and able to do a good job and not be suffering from stress that can have ramifications after weeks and months of daily stress and worry.
Yeah, again, this is so much more important now than it was before we all started working remotely. It was always important. Feedback is one of the most, having feedback and regular conversations and support and so forth is one of the most important things managers can do. And we've known this forever, but particularly now, this is more important. And with that quality, regular feedback, people are, again, 3 times more likely to be motivated and be engaged. Well, here's some statistics from the Gallup poll that we were talking about before. If you ignore performance, about 2% of the people will be actually engaged, not just compliant, but only 2% will be engaged. If you focus on the negatives and try and correct, look at what they're doing wrong and give them feedback to improve their performance, about 45% will be engaged. If you take a strength base, focusing on the positives and how to develop opportunities for them to grow, it goes dramatically up from there, somewhere around 61 to, I've heard even higher than that in terms of how the impact of it, focusing on the positives. And it's not that you need to be sitting down and asking them to, you're not going to be an executive coach, but having that coach-like understanding of how people work, a continuous flow of communication, a continuous flow of feedback, and also just establishing that connection, knowing what's going on in their lives and so forth.
Now, we've got a couple of questions come in, Kirk, so I'll ask the first one. Helen asks, how do you manage and lead those who are resistant to the offer of support? When I offer something and get thanks, but no thanks, I don't need help or support. What's driving that?
Well, it's an interesting question, because one of the things that you want to look at is what kind of relationship has been happening so far, not only with them to you, but inside of the workplace. This might be an opportunity to start looking at the overall sense of culture that you have and increasing the levels, not only in terms of managerial types of communication with people, but I've seen lots of people try things like, let's just have lunch together on Zoom on a Friday. Virtual drinks is all over the place, that kind of thing. Or setting up a sense of allies inside the team, so that people are connecting with each other as well, so that they see that there's that the workplace is not just a place of dry accountability. Accountability is really important, but it's also a place where people are actually connecting as people and making that part of the culture.
Another question has come in. Wondering about your opinion on managing working at home when the setup doesn't allow for separation from others in the home.
Yes, that's difficult.
You've got a caravan in the back.
I moved. I have a little caravan in my backyard just to get away from the dogs and children. And
what is the silver lining in COVID? Where do you find hope in all of this?
We have been going along with, as I said, with things as they were, and this is a fantastic opportunity to reinvent what we do and how we do it. There's so many opportunities. One of the things that's really come out for me is working, like I used to do a lot of one-day workshops, and there's a lot of great things about being able to spend a day together, but often that was largely a convenience of scheduling, to set it aside for one day. It's much more powerful now to take that one day, that thing that you're going to do for one day together, and split it up into 2 or 3 hour-and-a-half sessions. there's not only is it more efficient in terms of people's time and they can access it and there's less travel to stay in hotels and so forth, but also there's 6 times the level of activities that come out of a workshop that's split up into little sections like that, rather than spending a whole day trying to translate it. So this is the time where we're not just translating what we did before, but to really look at what's brilliant, what's new, what's opportunities to have more efficient meetings, to record our meetings.
And going back to the importance of, as a manager, having high emotional intelligence, to what degree can a manager who perhaps is low in EQ develop that capacity? How do they improve their EQ?
Oh, there's some great things we can be doing around this. The EQ comes down to basically 4 things, and in the form that comes from Daniel Goleman. There's the RUM model from the people before him, but you know, understanding yourself and managing yourself, understanding others and managing others. So in terms, it starts really with understanding yourself as the key basics. And so this is something that you can do with coaching. It's something you can do with, you know, developing journaling exercises. There's a number of different ways that you can start to develop and make what's implicit explicit about your understanding of who you are.
It's about reflection and observation, because
Yes.
someone with high emotional intelligence will have a verbal interaction and say it didn't go so well. They might actually spend time thinking, what might I have said differently? Or what was I picking up? Whereas someone with low EQ would just go, oh, that didn't go well, and just keep moving.
So feedback is a very important part of this process, because we aren't very good judges of our own abilities around EQ. And feedback and coaching, this is really key for us if we're going to actually develop around this. We can't just do it on our own.
With emotional intelligence, I recently saw someone being interviewed on television and said, well, I was a police officer and I learned to read people. And when I heard that, I went, well, there you go. There's an example of someone that learned how to read people, which is a high emotionally intelligent skill. And it's about managers saying, well, reading people and reading their non-verbal cues or their non-verbal responses, whether they are engaged with their eyes or engaged with their expression, and not just ignoring it. So it's something that people can choose to bring up their level of skill in that area. Would you agree?
And it just highlights the importance of one-on-one meetings with people. I love telling the story that I had one time. It was a face-to-face workshop, and I had this person in the audience who was staring at me. She had a very bitter, twisted look on her face, and all through the morning she wasn't responding, but she was just almost glaring at me. I said, boy, this is really going wrong for her. So during the lunchtime, I came up to her and said, how's it going today? She goes, and she kept the same expression on her face. She goes, this is fantastic. This is the best thing I've ever done. I just couldn't read her face, because she, it really does often take the one-on-one relationship to find out. We can't make assumptions based on some of these things.
At the same time, in that situation, it wasn't up to you to give feedback, but perhaps that person could learn that sometimes my expression is communicating a message that may not be matching what I'm actually wanting to communicate.
That's right.
So that's also about being aware of the message that you're sending with your body language.
Yes, that's right.
That's some of the things we teach, especially in customer service, say in a hospitality situation. If you're giving instructions, you can't smoke there, you have to smoke there, but you're standing with your hands on your hips. What sort of a vicious sort of message? One final question, and it relates to the growth mindset, fixed mindset. Is there a certain type of personality that is thriving in working from home, as opposed to others that just they're pulling their hair out because they really can't stand it?
It's a good question. I don't know of any research around that. I've been really interested in looking at, though, how there's practices around this that we can do, so that no matter what your type of personality, there's something you can do to improve it. And so those 5 factors we talked about before, connecting more, but basically the main idea is if you those communication, connection, feedback, those factors, if you've been doing it a little bit, now you need to do it a lot. And find some structures or strategy to make sure that you're doing it, not relying on your just automatic type of default way of thinking. So if you used to communicate, regularly once a month or so, find a way to do it weekly, and try and find some way to do it in real time. So like, I'm part of one group of people working together. We use Slack, and that's automatically anytime anybody does something, it shows up on Slack, and that way I have a sense of what's going on with the rest of the members of my team.
And what the research is showing is that some people are saying they're forgetting how to do their job because of the daily stress. It actually creates amnesia. So we have to be aware. We have to be light on people and not go, well, why can't you remember that? You used to do that so well. We have to be kind to each other, because we're all under this creeping unknown
Yes.
that we're dealing with together. So we're part of a point in history that people will be referring to for a long time, but we're actually living it.
One of the people that one of the teams that I've been coaching, a manager for a team, and one of the things that she did was she was thinking about how can we help people to engage with each other more the way they used to in the office. And so she certainly is reaching out to people that she thinks are struggling, but she asked each of them too, like, find 2 or 3 people and just connect with them on a regular basis, particularly not just your best friends in the workplace, but someone you think might be struggling. And asking people to, another workplace that I was doing some work with, they set up a soiree. So, at the end of the month, people bring, their harmonica, their ukulele, and they spend just like a fireside chat, but just sharing, sort of talent hour over the Zoom. But just ways of connecting with people is helpful to have a sense of that tribe.
I was wondering before, when you talked about growth mindset or fixed mindset, do you think growth mindset might see this as an opportunity, whereas fixed mindset go, oh, it was better before, when can we go back to how it was before? Do you think there's an element of that?
Yeah, absolutely. A great question, a great set of questions to ask is when, there's an opportunity like this, or what's difficult about this, sure, and what do we need to, we have to manage the crisis part of it. But the other question is, what's interesting right now? What's something we haven't ever seen before? What's possible now? And having that sort of sense of curiosity and making that a regular practice to notice what's interesting or what's something I can do different than I've done before.
I really like that suggestion, Kirk, because I think that's a question that managers, they can actually be like a coach. Like the manager of the future thinks and acts like a coach. That's a coaching question where you're getting people to look at things that they perhaps were forgetting or not observing. So, well, look, it's always wonderful to listen to your wisdom, Kirk, because you
wisdom.
always have a good angle on things. I'm going to close the meeting now. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and we'll have another live Q&A in the near future.